Joan Tuberty from the town of Meredith and a member of SEEK, Citizens Energy and Economics Council of Delaware County. I'd like to thank Delhi College and particularly Ruth Hughes, the 10 co-sponsoring all-volunteer groups who have hosted this hearing, Heidi Goggins, a bovina egg farmer, among other enterprises who initiated the idea. When you come up to speak, say your name clearly and also please spell your name. The hearing is being transcribed and there's a sound recording being made and then a transcriber will be typing and sending those recordings to the DEC. If you are not going to make a public statement, a speaking comment today, you may still send letters. There's a table to the left of the door as you go out with information on submitting written comments. They need to be postmarked by this Wednesday, January 11th. And finally, I'd like to welcome our moderators, Keitha Kapuya and Larry Bennett. Thank you very much for being here.
Can I go ahead? Yes, please. I'm Elizabeth Tatum, speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, in support of the League of Women Voters of New York, which will be submitting written comments that are much more detailed. We are speaking for our own state leagues because water and air have no regard for state boundaries. Our 4 state leagues have worked closely together in studying the regulations proposed by the Delaware River Basin Commission, and we have issued several joint comments to the DRBC. Our citizens all share both the benefits and hazards related to the extraction of fossil fuels within the region. Having conducted studies and developed positions on natural resources at both state and national levels, the League believes that government policies should promote an environment beneficial to life through the protection and wise management of natural resources in the public interest. With this in mind and our knowledge of the evolving issues connected with horizontal drilling and high-volume hydraulic fracturing in the Marcellus Shale, we strongly urge Governor Cuomo and Secretary Martins to extend the current moratorium on hydraulic fracturing in New York until the EPA study on the effects of hydrofracking on drinking water has been concluded. The verdict regarding the impact of hydraulic fracturing on our land, air, and water resources is still out. Sound decision-making concerning public health must be based on science, and the science isn't in yet. The importance of awaiting independent scientific feedback is exemplified by the recently released EPA study findings based on 2 test wells and other data from Pavilion, Wyoming. The 2-year study results show the presence in the aquifer of compounds consistent with hydraulic fracturing, such as the solvent 2-butoxide ethanol, phenol, acetone, toluene, naphthalene, and traces of diesel fuel. In addition, the EPA has recently initiated efforts to determine how waste products from natural gas drilling can be disposed safely. This is a critical area to study in view of illnesses being reported near heavy drilling sites due to water and air contamination. By waiting until we know how to drill safely, the DEC will benefit from these findings before taking steps that may not sufficiently protect the health of people, crops, and animals that will provide our milk and meat. Results of another study to consider is the health consultation released November 4, 2011, that was conducted by the Centers for Disease Control of 7 wells and aquifers in Leroy Township, Bradford County, Pennsylvania, that were contaminated by the blowout of a natural gas well there last April. In addition, concerns have been raised about the deep injection waste storage wells inducing earthquakes when 2 of these wells were recently shut down in Ohio after a 4.0 magnitude earthquake. A careful review of similar earthquakes is needed. For instance, 2 of these deep injection waste wells were also shut down in the spring of 2011 after a 4.7 magnitude earthquake that was part of a group of more than 1,000 smaller earthquakes that occurred in the Greenbrier area of Arkansas less than a year ago. Other suspected induced earthquakes in Oklahoma, Virginia, and Texas suggest that this method of disposal may have some inherent problems and need to be controlled or avoided before proceeding. We also suggest a national health registry to document illness, accident, human and animal deaths that may have been related to hydrofracking, whether due to water or air contamination, explosion, or exposure while working in the industry. In summary, an end to the de facto moratorium now represents a premature misstep that may endanger the health of millions of residents, not only in New York, but also those living downstream or nearby in other states in the region. The drinking water of 81% of Delaware, 34% of New Jersey, 32% of New York, and 42% of Pennsylvania's residents is at risk. The state leagues of women voters of Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania therefore specifically request and respectfully request that you adhere to the precautionary principle and wait to finalize the SGEIS until the EPA has issued its study report. Thank you for the opportunity to provide input. Carol Jones, President, League of Women Voters of Delaware. Tony Zimmer, President, League of Women Voters of New Jersey. Olivia Thorne, President, League of Women Voters, Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Betsy Babcock, and I would like to address the powers in Albany, including Governor Cuomo. My husband and I own a farm in Franklin, New York, which we purchased 10 years ago with our life savings. We have worked hard to establish an organic blueberry farm and a farm-stay bed and breakfast, which is our primary farm-based income and our future retirement income. Last year, we had over 100 families from the downstate area stay with us because they wanted their children to experience the beauty, peace, and fresh air that our farm and our community provides. Good Morning America featured us as an ecologically friendly place to stay. We can literally see our guests relax between their first night and their last as they spend time together, marveling at the quiet and beauty. Each time we see this, it gives us an even greater appreciation for the treasure that the Catskills are to our entire state. We live just outside the New York City watershed, and under current proposals are not offered protection from drilling. We are absolutely opposed to fracking activity in our area for the following reasons. Number one, Delaware County has a pristine and balanced ecological environment and a clean water system. It is an irreplaceable New York and national treasure. We must preserve it for future generations and not become another Pennsylvania or West Virginia for the financial benefit of a few. Number two, our personal water supply comes from a well. Handsome Brook is directly behind our home. Nothing is worth contaminating our water. Oil companies and some government officials would like to tell us that the risks associated with hydrofracking are overblown and without merit, that we should make sacrifices for an independent national energy policy. I am not willing to sacrifice my health and my family's health and safety for national energy policy or for the profits of oil companies. There is hypocrisy in the way that the policy current proposals are written to protect a few urban areas and throw the rest of us out with the bathwater. That is economic discrimination, and it is not, and it violates equal protection under the law. Thank you very much for your consideration.
We'll remind you.
I tell you, this will start to the left of the name spelled.
Carl Arnold, C-A-R-L-A-R-N-O-L-D, just like the bread. I'm a member of Sea Dog, the Sierra Club, and the Green Party. What are we doing here, really? Will the DEC really listen to what people here say today? A year ago, the DEC got 13,000 responses, went back to the drawing board, and here we are today responding to yet another absurd joke. Who here does not know that the governor's fracking commission is hopelessly stacked? Do you really believe that the industry's deep pockets will not corrupt our safety? This is all about permitting through regulation, which is licensing corporations to get away with legalized destruction. If drilling is too dangerous for the New York City and Syracuse unfiltered watersheds, it's too dangerous for my unfiltered well, 15 minutes north of here, and it's too dangerous for the unfiltered wells of many in this room, and too dangerous anywhere. Yet the DEC bends over backwards to enable fracking. The DEC says, never mind the myth of clean energy, never mind the myth of energy independence or the myth of safety or the myth of jobs. The governor's compliant DEC claims that it can regulate fracking. Really? What regulation can prevent the heavy metals and radioactive substances from coming up with the gas and spreading downwind? What regulation can prevent the extraordinary squandering of fresh water, 100% of which becomes contaminated permanently? What regulation can prevent our food shed from suffering a lack of sufficient water to feed us? What regulation can prevent up to 70% of fracking chemicals from remaining underground, becoming fuel for the migration of underground toxic plumes? One of the many cruel jokes in this SGEIS, setbacks. Underground plumes are all over New York State, from Long Island to Endicott, and they continue to spread. In Sublette County, Wyoming, one plume traveled 28 miles. And the DEC is talking about drilling near schools, homes, and, 1,000-foot setback or 4,000 feet from the New York City water infrastructure, 28 miles in Wyoming. If the recommendations in the SGEIS become law, they'll protect the privileges of the few against the rights of the many, us. The oil and gas corporations are trying to colonize us. Do we want to become a third world outpost? The SGEIS, however it's tweaked, enables the poisoning of our soil, air, and water, the foundation of the natural systems that sustain life. Such an assault is criminal. If we continue on this path, all of us, the 99%, I'm almost done, all of us, the 99% and the 1%, will go careening over the edge. The DEC operates as if corporate rights are superior to the rights of the people. We protect ourselves only by asserting our right to protect ourselves. If we don't decide our fate, corporations will. It's our right and our duty to protect our own lives. There's only one solution for criminal activity: criminalize it. Look, it's our right and our duty to protect our state, since it looks like the governor and the DEC won't. New York State must criminalize fracking and everything to do with fracking. Our very survival is at stake. Thank you.
My name is Mary Cherokee. It's MaryCiarrocchi. And I'm a resident of southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm a member of the Sierra Club and the League of Women Voters. As a resident of Pennsylvania, I've become very familiar over the past 3 years with the Marcellus Shale issue. We have heard reports from the drilling areas upstate about drilling fluid spills, explosions, methane gas leaks, drinking water contamination, illness in residents living near drilling sites, disruption of daily life by nonstop trucks rumbling through towns, and a general loss in quality of life. And now any state land, forests, game land, state university land can be sites for drilling. I live in Chester County, not in the shale area, but even here we're not free of the effects of drilling. Here our farms, rivers, and residential areas are crisscrossed by the pipelines that will carry the gas from upstate to delivery to New Jersey and Delaware. But contrary to the industry claim that natural gas will help free us from dependence on foreign sources of fuel, much of this liquefied natural gas will be sold outside the United States to the highest bidders in Asian and European markets, where the price even now is much higher than it is here. The rush to reap quick profits is sidelining the larger issue of threats to the health of our citizens. In my state, the industry has had a very loud voice in deciding our future, and the voices of the people impacted by the results of drilling have been ignored. Pending legislation will even take away the rights of local governments to make any decisions on the location of drilling sites and whether or not they want drilling in their communities. We are constantly bombarded by television advertising that would give the impression that drilling is the best thing that has ever happened to Pennsylvania. And information such as that presented by Cornell University professor Anthony Ingraffia does not reach the people. I would not say learn from our mistakes, because I feel that our main problem has been an administration determined to assist the natural gas industry in every way, and not a population that doesn't care. I would urge the people of New York to demand that their elected officials put their health and welfare first, and wait until the evidence is in before this industry is allowed to change your state forever. I am here today testifying because I see and dread the thought of what my state will become within a few years, and I hope that the same fate does not await New York.
Thank you, Senator Litsky.
My name is Robert Lidsky, that's Lidsky. I live in Andes. I'm a member of Andes Works. Fresh water is our most precious resource and is in limited supply. The need for fresh water applies everywhere in all of New York State, not just the New York City and Syracuse watersheds. Every well and water supply depends on a watershed. There have been no studies done by an independent and unbiased agency that address the cumulative impacts that multiple gas wells will have on our air and water. The SGEIS that the DEC is now contemplating does not require that before drilling permits are issued, the gas companies perform and pay for independent peer-reviewed studies of air and water quality. If put into law, this oversight will prove to be a grave error, providing a legacy of major irreversible damage. I believe that with sufficient scientific data collected over a period of years, that the process of horizontal hydraulic fracturing will prove to be inherently unsafe and will cause greatly increased public health risks through extensive air and water pollution. We do not and will not have the money to do, nor do we have the political will to adequately regulate fracking. We can only look at the accelerating environmental and social devastation in states like Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wyoming for proof. I urge you to think long range and resolve to protect the citizens of New York State. Please do the right thing and place your taxpayers' environmental and socioeconomic concerns before the self-interests of the gas companies and the legislators who are being heavily lobbied with crushing amounts of gas industry money. Ban fracking. Without fracking, long range, New York will remain one of just a few safe places to live, which is a distinct economic and social advantage over other states, a competitive advantage in not fracking. Thank you.
Karen Ditter.
My name is Karen Dietert, and I live in Delaware County, town of Franklin, on County Road 16. I live within the watershed, and my property is surrounded by at least 400 acres owned by the city of New York. Despite this so-called respite that I have from fracking, I feel it is my responsibility to speak out as a citizen of the state of New York against an extraction method that uses toxic and carcinogenic chemicals that can and will poison our water and will wreak havoc on the environment through air, noise, and traffic pollution. My position is that hydrofracking should be banned in the state of New York, and I find it a travesty that we are even here discussing the possibility of using hydrofracking to drill for natural gas. However, Today I would like to address DEC's prematurely proposed regulations and discuss if hydrofracking can even be safely regulated. Keep in mind this is the same industry that in 2005 successfully persuaded Congress and the Bush administration to exempt fracking from the Safe Drinking Water Act, the same industry that in 2009 aggressively fought efforts to require that drilling companies publicly reveal what chemicals they inject into the ground, and the same industry that last year sought to narrow the Environmental Protection Agency's study on fracking's risk to water resources. Regulating this industry is much like having a tiger by the tail, and one wonders if the DEC and its regulations are up to controlling an industry so adverse to regulation. When fully operational in a decade, the industry could be drilling hundreds of wells a year. Who is going to police all this activity, and who is going to pay for the regulatory structure? Neither of these two questions are addressed in the proposed regulations. There are 17 staff for Division of Mineral Resources to oversee 14,000 plus active wells and new permits. Absent adequate funding measures and staff, the regulations are irresponsible and the DEC will not be able to do its job effectively. It would appear the DEC would rush permitting and then pretty much let the industry itself regulate it until its wells are capped. The proposed regulations are unacceptably vague with regard to what will become of the billions of gallons of toxic waste that arise from the flowback that drillings bring to the surface. Sewage plants are not equipped to handle these wastes, open pits are out of the question, and sealed containers are only a temporary fix. And there are no disposal wells in New York, so there is literally no place to get rid of the raw fracking flowback and few landfills to get rid of the processed sludge. There are no effective mechanisms to shield communities from the impacts of industrialized landscapes. Issues such as above-ground gas leaks and methane release and air pollution, as well as what industry should be required to do to restore the landscape to its original condition after wells go dry, are not adequately addressed or not addressed at all in the regulations. And while, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eleanor, E-L-E-A-N-O-R. The last name is Moriarty, M-O-R-I-A-R-T-Y. I am here today to represent Delaware Otsego Audubon Society. I'm a board member and program chair. I'm here to read our position paper on gas drilling and hydrofracking as authored by our conservation chair, Andy Mason. Our concerns with hydrofracking gas exploration and production deals with 7 points. Potential ground and surface water contamination from the many toxic chemicals used in hydrofracking and shale. Storage and disposal of above-ground production fluids such as in open lagoons or in nearby streams or trucked to an unprepared wastewater treatment plant. 3, impacts to wildlife and their habitats, including high-volume water withdrawals. 4, damage to roads and other surface features such as forests, agricultural areas, and waterways. 5, noise and pollution. 6, immediate and adequate responses to any accidents or spills. 7, cumulative social impacts of pipelines and wells that will impact upon scenic beauty, rural character, tourism, taxes, wine industries, property values, sports and agriculture, and wildlife viewing and birding, which brings in a ton of money into New York State annually. Even with the most stringent controls and oversight, this activity is unacceptable danger to our planet and to our environment. No environmental benefits can come out of this. As such, we oppose hydrofracking gas exploration and production in our region and elsewhere. We call upon the state of New York to permanently ban this practice. This was passed by our board in October of 2009, and we still stand by this statement today, even with all of the regulations that they're trying to redo. Thank you.
My name is Roy Tedoff, Tedoff, from Hortonville, New York. In its own language, the SGEIS shows that it does not protect all New Yorkers equally and that regulations are required to ameliorate this problem. Chapter 6 goes into detail regarding the danger of fracking in the New York City and Syracuse water systems. Quote, detailed well pad containment requirements and setbacks proposed for high-volume hydraulic fracturing are likely to effectively contain most surface spills at and near the vicinity of well pads. Nevertheless, despite the best controls, there's a risk of releases to primary or principal aquifers of chemicals, petroleum products, and drilling fluids from the well pad. Turbidity, still quoting, turbidity or suspension of solids in the water supply can result from aquifer penetration, including water wells, if sufficient porosity and permeability or a natural subsurface fracture is present to transmit the disturbance. Goes on to say, in general, the pollutants of key concern when managing an unfiltered drinking water system include toxic compounds. As explained below, the adverse impacts of these contaminants are substantially heightened in unfiltered drinking water systems. It goes on to say unfiltered drinking water supplies have a heightened sensitivity to chemical discharges if there's no immediately available method to remove contaminants. And well pad containment practices and setbacks are likely to effectively contain most spills at these locations, but there's a continuing risk, however, of releases from chemicals, petroleum products, etc. The intensive level of trucking actively associated with high-volume hydraulic fracturing, including the transport of chemicals and petroleum products, presents an additional risk of surface water contamination due to truck accidents, etc. So New York City and Syracuse are off limits to drillers. The remainder of the population, quote, is served by individual private wells or public surface water supplies or community supplies outside the primary aquifer areas. Outside the prescribed areas, but still over the Marcellus, the water in this area is also non-filtered. Is its typography less permeable everywhere? Is it free of subsurface fractures everywhere? Do its roads never run alongside streams? This is the area where fracking is to be allowed, the area to be protected by the stipulations that the SGEIS considers mostly effective. Two implications from this are clear. Accidents may happen, fracking fluid is toxic. Nothing addresses, time is up? All right, let me just read this last paragraph. Given the toxicity of the fracking fluids and the fact that under certain circumstances, water supplies are vulnerable to contamination by this toxicity, the SGEIS must make explicit that the process of fracking, the drip, is considered a hazardous activity and that strict liability be applied where accidents occur. Not to include strict liability in the regulations is unconscionable. Not to compensate those whose quiet enjoyment of their homes is ruined by fracking is prejudicial. It leaves small homeowners not only without water, but with no resource but to sue large, out-of-state corporations and their armies of lawyers. These requirements must be added to the SGEIS. The document as written turns its back on sacrificial individuals who are not, in this document, given equal protection under the law.
We have two more speakers in the first 10, but I would like now to call 11 through 20, so you can sort of be getting up and coming forward. Susanna Petzold, Jan London, Alicia Pagano, William Turek, Bob Gokes, Jack Tessier, Linda Gokes, Lottie Marsh, Midge Maroney, and Joe Lehman. Our next speaker will be Ann Finneran.
Let me add something to this. You know,
Okay, before I speak, I just want to apologize because I have spoken before, and I understand it's logistically difficult for me to exchange my slot with somebody who hasn't spoken before. So I'm going to read now. I'll also say I will be bearing witness to another person, so that may help to mitigate my being out of order. My name is Ann Finneran. That's A-N-N, F as in Frank, I-N-N-E-R-A-N. I wanted to read a comment I received from an old buddy of mine from high school who lives in Bradford County, PA. And so her name is Bonnie Knapp-Gill. And here's her comment. All I know, Anne, is that here in PA, nothing is the same. You can take a drive in the country, but watch your ass. The trucks will either push you off the road, if there is a road left, and the farms are gone, and that's in caps. There are well towers and lights and dynamite and noise and water trucks and drills and jackhammering and keep out signs and well signs and ruts as big as some of the cars in the area ad infinitum. I swear that if some of the people had known, in caps, what they'd actually do to the land, it never would have happened. Yes, the money fans are partly responsible, but the damned economy, an oxymoron, and the depressed situation of many of the farming communities, well, it was bound to happen. And they don't flipping care, in caps, about a single thing. Seriously, need we frack 24/7, 3 question marks? I think it's just plain rude, in caps, to run those trucks on these roads all day and night. Does it not, in caps, matter that the real people of the world need their sleep, rest, or just plain quiet? No, it doesn't. And that is... That follows on the new sections on existing transportation conditions, impacts, and mitigation, and new sections on community character, impacts, and mitigation. I also, for the record, would like to quote Paul Hetzler, the former environmental engineering technician for NYS DEC Region 5 in the Watertown Daily Times of December 13th, 2011. Quote, hydraulic fracturing as it's practiced today will contaminate our aquifers. Not might contaminate our aquifers, hydraulic fracturing will contaminate New York aquifers. If you were looking for a way to poison the drinking water supply here in the Northeast, you couldn't find a more chillingly effective and thorough method of doing so than with hydraulic fracturing, close quote. I read this simply to get it in the official records of the DEC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard Hannum, Howard-Hannum, small farm owner from Trout Creek. In watching the events of the last 6 months alone unfold, we have seen enough devastation, loss of life, bodily harm to warrant the abandonment of this entire process. To watch our neighboring states endure the downright stupidity on the part of their state governments that allow gas companies to literally pour millions of gallons of radioactive shale fractures mixed with over 300 known neurotoxins and endocrine disruptors into a spent well for storage is both disgusting and criminal. To allow the same companies to dump the brine into rivers and streams is mind-boggling. I call for an immediate and permanent ban on gas and oil extraction in the state of New York. Earthquakes are a very big problem in this industry, as McDonald, Ohio just recently experienced its 11th earthquake last week. The most recent one registered a 4 on the Richter scale and was felt as far away as Toronto, Canada. Barnett Shale earthquakes throughout Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas have been ranging in size from 3.3 to 5.2. Injecting brine into a spent well cannot be allowed in New York. On December 3rd, 2011, the Williams Pipeline exploded in Grand Prairie City, Alabama, destroying 65 acres of sustainable pine forest. On New Year's Eve in Middletown, Connecticut, a clean energy compression station blew up, killing 5 people and injuring 15. The Clean Air Council of Philadelphia, in cooperation with Cornell University and Penn State, is testing air quality and finding massive pollution throughout northeastern Pennsylvania and the southern tier of New York. Using infrared video and technology, they are showing well sites that are spewing methane and fracking chemicals, as well as radon and radioactive shale fractures into the atmosphere. They are literally thumbprinting the air in these different neighborhoods through responsible air testing. Colorado is breathing air that is lethal to infants and seniors and is causing an increase in asthma and other respiratory diseases. Water incidents are increasing at an alarming rate across the country, and with multiple accidents on record, companies like Cabot, Chesapeake, and Encana are either not learning from their own mistakes or they just don't care. Chesapeake leaked fracking fluid into a farm in Cato Parish, Louisiana, that killed 19 cows in May of 2009, and just recently had a major fracking disaster in Arlington, Texas, which leaked fracking fluid into the community. Chesapeake was the company of record when a farmer in Bradford County, PA, lost 9 cows to grazing and fracking fluid on a Monday morning in early spring of last year, and my time is up.